Well, delighted to be here again this evening, and thank you for inviting me back. As my custom is, and has been recently, this event, I will keep my address relatively brief because there are two far more spectacular speakers to follow who are going to grace this lectern. So I will be pointed. I am quite happy just to answer some questions at the conclusion. I suspect there might be a couple from the floor, and I'm happy to respond to those. I hope you don't mind a little bit of candour and transparency tonight. I have to say, the last 12 months for me have probably been the most challenging of my life personally and professionally. And I think that started with the death of Lindsay Hocking, who was actually a really good friend of mine, and obviously the former rector of King's High School. At the start of the year, my mum passed away unexpectedly and certainly from my point of view, prematurely. And that was followed by Warwick Larkins, and then latterly one of my staff members and again a good friend of mine, Ken Bishop, passed away, and I ended up doing I think 3 out of 4 of those funerals, and it's been a pretty heavy load personally. And on top of that, professionally, we've had a little bit of a run-in with the Ministry of Education. And that really started in August last year. And really has continued through to the scuffle that you've seen played out in the paper a wee bit. And I do thank the Ministry for that free advertising over our open night period. I was just saying to the folks at my table, it was an interesting exercise. We had open night on the 31st of July, and I'm not a big believer in coincidence. It just so happened that the newspaper found out on the 30th of July that there was potentially a limited statutory manager going to be put in place in the school, and that was reported the morning of our open night. And I think there might have been an intent behind the releasing of that information. It just so happened the parents actually thought that would be quite interesting to come along and see what was happening at King's. And we ended up with over 800 people at the open night. We learned something about Brian Frost's mathematics. 800 was meant to be split evenly into 10 groups, and so that's not particularly complicated. The first group that turned up at my station, because I have a station where I talk to the parents and the boys about, particularly the parents actually, about curriculum, there were 147 people in a classroom. Very intimate affair, and it looks like the enrolments for next year are reasonably solid. So, while I realise that my personal and professional plight doesn't necessarily paint a rosy picture, I do want you to know that none of that personal gloom has descended upon the school. The boys are in fantastic heart, and the school is functioning really, really well. Our NCA results last year, and I remember standing on the stage in front of the boys and said, I'll try and get the maths right here, 2011, 2012, we were the top ranked state boys school in the country in terms of our NCA pass results, and I said to them, 2013 boys, we were second by 0.1%. I don't like coming second in anything. And so the challenge was to fix it. I was devastated at the start of this year to find that we were second again by 0.3%. So not only were we second, but we're going backwards. So very, very disappointing. So look, the NCA results are great. Honestly, our university entrance results were disappointing, and that's certainly a work on for us. It's a reflection really of two things. One, the calculation for university entrance is a really interesting one. In all other aspects of our NCA calculations, they base it on participation. In other words, who is actually eligible to get the qualification. University entrance, they don't. So if you're sitting in that course, even if you're not ever going to get university entrance, you're counted as a participant, which is interesting. It probably doesn't mean anything to you, but it's fascinating for me in terms of the calculation. But it also means we've got a mix of students at our school, and that's always been the case at King's. We've got some boys who are equipped and ready to go to university, and there are some boys in year 13 who just love school, and they love the culture and the environment, and are never going to head to university, and don't do courses that will give them entry to university. And that's great. As long as they're good men and they go and pursue what their passion is, then we celebrate that too. So we're working on university entrance results. We're working on our scholarship results. And for the first time this year, we have established standalone scholarship classes, and we are the only school in Otago doing that. And basically, if you're doing calculus, statistics, biology, chemistry and physics, and I've actually said to all my staff, if you can get 14 boys, and probably 12 is the cut-off, who are capable of scholarship, you can have a standalone class. And this year, for the first time, we've got 5 of those, and we're hoping for really big things. We've got 160 boys, or 160 scholarship entries, and that's about 60 boys. And so there's a heck of a lot of boys trying for scholarship, and that speaks volumes to me about the culture of the school and the shifts that we've made. When I first started, we really didn't have any more than about 10 or 15 entries in scholarship. And so the conversation has changed in the staff room, the conversation has changed amongst the boys, and that's very encouraging for me. So academically going well, the role obviously is tracking pretty well. We were never going to eclipse the 257 Year 9 boys we got in 2014, but 221 this year was about 51% of the available population. So again, a pretty good return. And the school roll sat at just over 1,050 on the 1st of March, which I think probably is our largest. Did you manage to get over 1,050? I think Colin Donald might have had about 1,000, but there were about 260 ghosts. slight hyperbole there, but anyway. I think one of the greatest intangibles at the school at the moment is the culture, and it's really hard to actually articulate because it's hard to kind of explain what it looks like. But I really have 3 pictures for you that hopefully give you a sense. Firstly, we do a survey every year with our Year 9 students and our Year 10s actually. It's an NZCER survey, so it's a national one. And the boys, in complete anonymity, fill in the survey. This year our Year 9s filled that in. 100% of the boys, that's 220 boys, said they were proud to be at the school. And that's phenomenal. So the national average in that particular survey is 51%. 99% of them said they felt really safe at the school. And the national average is about 74%. And that is just, that's remarkable stuff, because there's no pressure put on them to fill in the response. They say what they think. And so I think that's a great reflection of the culture of the school. The second thing is, with a school of now about 1,020 boys, I have dealt with one incident this year where one boy has thrown one punch. And I think that's quite remarkable. Actually, in a school of our size, with boys being as they are, that boy naturally was stood down, and the boys know what the deal is. And actually, it's more than just fear, though, that's driving their actions. It's actually a respect for one another and a respect for their school. And I'm really proud of that. And the third one I think was quite interesting. I received a phone call in June from a lady, and she was a daughter, ringing in her capacity as a daughter. And she said, I just wanted to ring and let you know that my elderly father was heading home last night from Andy Bay, and he's 78 years old. And he was heading home, was going to Murray Hill where he lives, but he took a couple of wrong turns, and he ended up on the Peninsula Road. And it was pouring with rain, and he actually got quite distressed. And so he pulled over, and he got out of his car and tried to wave someone down, and of course, driving rain, no one really stopped, and so about 4 or 5 cars went past, and then a car pulled over. Just so happens it was one of my Year 12 boys heading back from hockey practice. And he stopped and saw this gentleman was distressed, and so he got out and he said, can I help you, sir? And the gentleman explained the situation. He said, look, you jump back in the car, and I'll turn around and I'll drive you back to Murray Hill to your house, and you follow me. And so you stay nice and close to me. So he turned around and started. Got about halfway back, and he realised by the way the gentleman was driving that he really wasn't making it, and it was dark and rainy, and he was obviously pretty shaken. So my young man pulled the car over, got out, asked the gentleman to come and join him, put him in the passenger seat, locked his car up and drove him home, walked him inside the door, got him settled with his wife, and then drove his way back. And I thought that was pretty special. And the couple said to their daughter, look, we forgot his name, but our best description is he was quite tall. So you can imagine, you know, I've got probably about 650 boys in the senior school. So armed with the description that I'm looking for a tall gentleman, I managed to find out who the boy was, and we invited him on stage in front of the entire school. And instead of being ridiculed, you know, he's actually elevated in the boys' mind and their eyes, and that's the way the school's kind of working. And he got a canteen voucher, so he was really happy. I think those probably are reasonably good indicators of the sort of heart that the school is in, and the sort of things we see. That's the academic side. In terms of the character development, you know, and I've spoken here many times about how important I think that is. We've continued with the Kingsman Society, and we're running that now into the senior school. And so this year our boys have been off at the Polytechnic learning about getting under the hood of a car and what sort of functional things they need to do. And I joined them. I have no idea. And I'm here tonight in the school band because my car broke down. So they're doing some of those things. They're also learning how to do some ballroom dancing and some of those old skills as well as some etiquette in the senior school. And so some of those skills the boys are actually buying into, and it's optional. They come in their own time, and we've still got about 70 or 80 boys coming to those sessions Wednesday nights. So that's going well. We also started up something this year called the King's Fathers Club, and we've basically had an invitation to all the fathers in year 9 and 10 initially. We had about 60 turn up, and we had a psychologist come and speak to us about teenage boys and some of their tendencies and how to support them in those. And we ate together, and then latterly we had our second meeting, and that was really around the digital world in which our boys live, which a lot of us are actually divorced from. And as dads, we learned what Snapchat is and what Facebook is and some of those things which we really didn't understand. So that's actually going really well, and I think a really good initiative. Sporting-wise, cricket won through the Gillette Cup. I mentioned that last year, and then we actually went at the end of the year and won our first ever game in Gillette Cup. I actually coached the side while they were there. It was the longest week of my life. We got absolutely destroyed 4 times out of 5. And when I say destroyed, like, that was really hard. It was really hard getting out of bed on Wednesday morning, I can tell you. But the boys put together the perfect performance on Wednesday, and we beat St Paul's. And Brendan McCullum was actually there, handed the boys their caps, stayed for a couple of hours and watched them. And then we managed to text them 2 days later to say, we managed something you never did. We won a game at the Gillette Cup. So he appreciated that. Softball and touch ranked 5th in New Zealand. Are doing a fantastic job. Small ball team still ranked highly. First ever qualified football for nationals for the first time in 20 years, and an increasing number of New Zealand representatives. And so the sport is in good heart and moving to strong places. In terms of capital projects, food technology room updated, 4 new classrooms. I say 4 new classrooms, they're ministry provided classrooms. They were meant to be functional on, I think, the 10th of February this year, so that we could get our boys in them because we were 4 classes light. We got our first class in those on the 27th of July, so we had some issues there. Currently, we have not received $230,000 that we need to actually pay the contractors to finish that job. So, like I say, my issues with the ministry are actually on a number of fronts, not just isolated to the one that's been in the paper. Projects moving ahead. Really excited for hopefully the start of next year. We're looking to build 3 indoor cricket nets. And they will be the only ones of their sort in Dunedin. And so that's a project we're expecting will cost somewhere in the vicinity of $300,000 to $350,000. And they'll be indoor under lights all year round. And we think a pretty good initiative. Also trying to work at the moment with the DCC and Otago Hockey at the prospect maybe of the 3rd full-size turf in Dunedin, and putting that where our tennis courts are. And we're again in consultation there, and it's about a $1.5 million project, but we won't be, hopefully, the major contributor, given that we'll provide the land and the facilities moving ahead. So a couple of things on the boil there, I'll keep you informed. Obviously the hostel we're still working on, and we're looking for leads there for people who are willing to assist. Good. And I guess the last thing is, I probably should touch on the proposed enrolment scheme. I'll maybe give you a brief overview of things as they sort of sit from my perspective. We sat in a meeting in August last year, and the Ministry of Education suggested to us that an enrolment scheme might be appropriate for our school. We said we didn't really think that would be appropriate and that it really wouldn't be a concern. The conversation sort of stalled for a while, and then we had the conversation again after our 1st of March roll, which put us around about 1,030 boys. According to their calculation, we have 52.5 classrooms, which means we have room for 1,035 boys. And so what they're basically saying is, well, you're 5 boys short of actually being overcrowded. I don't know how much to bore you with this, but how bored do you want to get? A bit of detail? Yeah. Okay. So the reason why we've been so adamant in our position and why we've refused to move is what's happened behind the scene is the real motivator behind this enrolment scheme has actually been revealed a couple of times in meetings, because we've got the ministry officials so wound up that they've actually revealed what their actual motivator is. And the motivator is not to keep Kings at 1,035 or wherever we're supposed to sit with our allocated classrooms, but it's actually to take our roll back to 944. And so that's their express purpose. And what they indicated to us right from the start is those 4 classrooms they put in at the start of the year, they decided to try and describe those as temporary classrooms. And there is nowhere, certainly in their documentation, where such a thing exists. But essentially the motivator is 944, that was their plan, take us back there over the course of 5 or 6 years and redistribute the students who otherwise would have come to Kings to the schools who are struggling. And so they have been quite overt about that to us behind closed doors, but obviously they're not going to say that publicly. And naturally, not only do I not want an enrolment scheme, because I think any boy in this city, because it's not a big city, should have the opportunity to come to Kings. But when the intention behind it is to actually drop our roll by 100 students, there's no way I'm signing off on anything. A perfect example, at open night, I had a mother come up to me and she said, I just want to thank you very, very much for fighting this enrolment scheme. And I said, okay, why is that? And she said, this is my son. And I shook his hand and she said, he's been bullied systematically for the last 5 years at school, both through primary school and intermediate school. And she said, I know, because there are similar boys who have come to your school who have had a great time. This is the only school, in my mind, where he's going to be able to survive and flourish. And she said, we live in North Dunedin, and if you stop fighting, there's no way my son's going to be able to come to your school. And I don't want to compromise his future. And that was actually pretty reaffirming, to be honest. And I want to assure you, this fight for us, it's not about empire building, it's not about ego, because I've got no ego on this. It's simply about every boy in our city who wants to come having the opportunity. And our argument to the Ministry of Education is we are not overcrowded. On any given week, we have 200 empty teaching spaces that could be taught. So how can that possibly be overcrowded? The average class size in year 9, 10 and 11 is 24 students. The average class size in year 12 is 20, and year 13 it's 18. It doesn't sound like overcrowding, does it? So what you realise is that there are other agendas actually at play, and I'm not going to go into those, but we're in a position where we're actually not going to step back from the stance that we've taken. We are in discussion with the Ministry of Education. They are likely to reach some sort of climax on Monday, and then we'll have a very clear idea about where they sit, and we already have a very clear idea about where we sit. So we're hoping not to go to the High Court, but that would be possibly the last course of action were they not to agree on an outcome that we think is both sensible and reasonable. So that's kind of the position as it stands. It's been a really interesting experience, but I believe our boys are worth fighting for, and we're going to stay in the fight as long as we need to. We'll see what ends up coming out the other end. Initially, potentially it was the board and myself being dismissed. It looks like they've decided to go for a slightly more gentle tactic with the limited statutory manager. But that's where we stand at the moment. So Kings